When I started welding, I started from the bottom. And over the course of 2 decades of TIG welding, I worked my way into my dream job. But to everybody's shock, I quit. I'm gonna tell you why, and honestly, some of you need to hear this. And it all kind of starts from where I started with welding. Right when I got out of high school, I went into college. I think I was like 19 at the time. The college program that I actually went to was for visual arts. I wanted to be an artist. I did college for over 2 years, and some of my favorite classes were photography, filmmaking, and video editing. I got super obsessed with that stuff. It was a ton of fun to learn. But one of the most impactful moments of my arts career, if you want to call it that, was when I took a 3D sculpture class. In this sculpture class, one of the sections was metal sculpture. And you could probably guess it, one of the things that we got to try was welding. Now, at this time, this is a pretty pivotal moment for the industry of metalworking, and a lot of you are gonna know what I'm talking about. Check this out. Around this time, the show Monster Garage came out. Monster Garage was hosted by this dude named Jesse James, super tattooed, loves listening to music, pretty much this guy these days, I guess. And I became absolutely obsessed with this show. I thought the culture around a shop looked so much fun to work in. I thought that the projects all these people were working on looked like so much fun, and welding looked like a blast to learn. So around this time, I finished my career as a visual artist, I guess you could say, and I got a job at a welding shop. Now, it was not glamorous. When I first started working at this shop, the first thing that they told me to do was go grab a broom, get to work, and don't complain. So you can bet, even though at this point I was only allowed to sweep the floor, I did the best job at it that I could. I think there's a saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything, and this is the attitude that I took from day one as a 21-year-old punk kid. Working around the shop, I saw a ton of welding and a ton of fabrication, but the one thing that I saw was TIG welding, and when I saw that, I got obsessed with it. Now, one thing that they said I could do was practice TIG welding on my own time. And as a dude who didn't have a lot of responsibility in life at the time, that's all I did was practice TIG welding on my own time. I essentially learned from complete trial and error over a long period of time. It was a ton of frustration. Nobody really helped me out. You guys have heard this story before, but after a lot of obsession and just sticking with it, I actually started to get pretty good. After a while of showing them the results that I was able to do, I got put on production. Finally, I get to put the broom down for a bit. After a while of doing production, I started to get even cooler jobs. We were making boats, so I was TIG welding out boats as well as aluminum cabins. I got certified on site. I did a bunch of testing. I also got certified and did testing for wire feed. And after years of doing this, I started to become one of the more capable guys on the shop floor. Now, this is around the 10-year mark of doing this, and to be honest, at this point, things kind of started to get a little bit stale, and I grew a bit tired of it. At this point, I wanted to reignite the kind of passion that I had for TIG welding and metalwork in general when I first started, so I made the decision to start pursuing some more legitimate certification and education. At the time, it was a little bit quiet at the shop, so it worked out really well with timing, and I pursued my apprenticeship with welding, finally. I did all my levels of that. I went back for a different specialty metals ticket. That was a ton of fun. I then went back for even further education and got my welding supervision ticket, or the CWS or whatever. Now, when I went back to my shop and having this position for a few years, I was really doing some cush welding jobs and doing some really nice stuff. It was a ton of fun at this point. It had essentially become something that I felt a little bit stuck in, and now it was like my dream job, it felt like. I worked for like a few more years at this level where I was essentially one of the main guys at the shop. I got to work around a ton of really talented people, some really good families, some really good friends. But at this point, the craziest thing happened is the school, the actual college that I went and got all my certification at, gave me a call one day. At this point, they offered me one of the positions to go in part-time and do instruction with welding students. That's right, I went from being a student to being one of the instructors at the institution. And when I took them up on this opportunity, I loved the experience of getting to work with people. The students that I was working with, it was super basic welding. It was for like students from other programs. There was like refrigeration students, sheet metal students, other people in other types of trades. They would come in and just need basic stuff like some oxyacetylene, basic wire feed, a little bit of stick. I did instruction on all that stuff with them. But it was like honestly kind of working with people that weren't really very passionate about welding. They were just there to get it as a tool that they needed with their trade, or to just check it off the list so they could pass their courses. So between doing different gigs at the college on my own time and working in my more high-end, if you call it, position at my shop, after a while again, things started to grow a bit tiresome and started to go a little bit south for me. I was having a blast with the different opportunities I got at this point, but again, for some reason, I started to feel a little bit bored, if I'm being honest. After a while with welding, I wasn't really feeling challenged again. The students that I was working with, like I said, they weren't terribly passionate about it. They just needed it and then moved on. And I felt like the stuff at the shop that I was doing, while it was really high end, a lot of it, I was just kind of mentally checked out. I just kind of show up, turn my brain off and start welding. I was doing the same things every day. While I was trying to do the best work that I could with them, it just wasn't the same exciting thing anymore. So it was at this point, I can't even explain why this happened or how this happened, but for some reason it popped into my brain that I should start a welding YouTube channel. Throwing back to things in the visual arts college, like almost 20 years previous, I was finally calling on skills for video editing, photography, also pulling on the knowledge that I had gained from doing instruction over years at the shop, as well as going on site with the college and teaching there. And YouTube kind of let me just do whatever I wanted as far as what I wanted to work on. I was making crazy sculptures for fun, two-dimensional art projects. It started out as like a way that I thought I could almost show off with TIG welding to other people, in the sense that I wanted other people to get as passionate about it as I was. And it was really genuinely cool because I was doing it just on my own time as a way of just burning off some steam and having fun with it. There was no plan of blowing this up in any way at all. And as I started to make these videos, I was getting YouTube comments of people asking, how do you do this stuff? What's the first thing that I should do? I want to try and learn some of this stuff. I've never even tried TIG welding before. What machine should I buy? And again, recalling my experiences with teaching, I started making videos that were more of a tutorial or education type thing. And doing it in a way where I was packaging it in these videos, it became so much fun for me. I was doing videos on how to actually do certain joints, how to properly assemble your gear, how to take your machines and totally like customize them and figure out how to work with the settings that you need to get going. Doing instructional videos, it was a really interesting way to take something that I knew how to do over and over in my brain, but to like articulate it into words that other people could understand is a totally new thing for me, and it was so fun. And the cool opportunity with working with people both in person but now making these videos was a way that I could package these together in a way that I genuinely wish I could have learned when I first started. Remember I talked about how I didn't have a lot of instruction or a lot of like positive people to like really encourage me along? This was an opportunity that I could put these videos together and put them out there for other people to enjoy. Because now I was making videos in ways that I wish I could have learned when I first started. I wanted to make an experience where everything was like put together in this perfect curriculum of like a way that I taught people in person, but I also kind of like wish I could have learned. And I started to build like a really in-depth curriculum that I could start taking people through by distance or by remote. I started working with people online and getting them going with TIG welding. I revised a curriculum and then a program. I did it a bunch of times, tried to make it better and better each time. And then at this point, with my interests kind of shifting completely, as well as starting to see a little bit of success with what I was doing online, it was a really, really tough decision. But at this point, I decided the only decision that I could make was to quit my job. The last day before I quit my job was the month before my 20th year of working at this shop. It was a big deal. I was excited to move on to something new, but I have to tell you, I was terrified. I was quitting literally my dream job, one that I had worked for like almost 2 decades, and I was quitting it to do YouTube full time. I had 2 kids, I had my wife, I had a mortgage and all kinds of other stuff that I had to take care of financially. And to be honest, when I quit my full-time job, I wasn't really making that much money at all. But I think it was just the excitement that made this make sense to me. And I knew that the passion that I was feeling was going to keep me moving forward, and I would figure it out. But honestly, leaving behind my production work with TIG welding, this is where I started to discover that teaching was actually going to be the next phase of this career that I had worked in for so long. I was teaching more and more people, and I found that I was getting better and better at explaining things and getting people some really good success. I don't show these photos to show off, but this is legitimately from people who have had no previous TIG welding experience, and look at the results they were able to get. It was almost like the more I taught other people how to do it, the better that I was starting to understand it, and I was actually getting better at TIG welding at this point. It was like a phase of improvement with TIG welding that I did not experience since I first started to learn, like when I was first doing it on night shift after sweeping the floors. It was like I said, I've always kind of known how to TIG weld after doing it for so long, but actually having to package it together and articulate it to somebody who didn't know what I was talking about taught me like a totally new skill of how to understand it for myself. Similar to like how martial arts arts or music people, like they reach a point with their craft where there's no other options but to just start passing it on to other people. And that's when they start to learn even more about it. And in doing so now online, I was able to spread this way further than just working with people in person. I was reaching like hundreds of thousands of people a month with my YouTube videos. It was crazy. When you're making a big decision, something like I'm talking about here, no matter what it is, change is always scary. But sometimes when it's the right thing, you can just literally feel it. No matter how much you try and put it aside, it's gonna pull at you. It's not gonna let go. So honestly, out there, if there's anybody watching who has this feeling with something, it doesn't have to be welding, it's just something in life that's kind of pulling at you and will not be quiet. I encourage you to listen to these things. If something is calling for you, pursue it. You don't have to take it as far as I did. You do not need to quit your job. I definitely want to make that clear. Like I said, I started this whole thing that you see here at night. In here by myself. I didn't have fancy cameras, lights, gear, or anything like that. I just had a basic welder, some material to start on, and I filmed everything with my phone. Then wake up super early the next morning, edit my footage on my laptop, and then show up at the full-time job I was working at every day as normal, and then still making sure that I carved out the proper time to spend time with my kids and my family. And even after all the doubt and all the scary feelings that I felt when I was debating whether or not I should pursue this, I am so glad I did, let me tell you. Just when I thought, honestly, my welding career was kind of coming to an end because of the lack of excitement and motivation that I was feeling, it's now kind of become something that's even bigger than I ever could have imagined if I had stayed in the same position. I hope that whatever you do as a craft or a passion, you can find ways to fall in love with it over and over and take it even further than you could have ever imagined. I appreciate all of you for following along with what I do. Thank you so much. And make sure you do a random act of kindness for a stranger today.